This week, you'll continue working on your poetry explication essay or your poetry analysis essay, which is going to be due on Sunday of this week. This is the first major essay assignment for English 102. So, in addition to the information that you'll find in Chapter 2 and Chapter 8 of your textbooks on how to write literary analyses, I'm going to provide a couple of videos and post them to Blackboard in order to help you along the way. This first video is going to discuss introductions. So I imagine that we're all familiar with introductions. We've written academic essays before, so some of this might be a little bit of a review. I want to remind you that one way to produce an introduction is to use something called the funnel method. And the funnel method starts broad and then gets narrow as we get a little bit closer towards the end of the introduction. Typically, the funnel is going to begin with a broad, universal, or thematic statement. This broad, universal, or thematic statement doesn't necessarily mention the text or mention the author, but usually connects to a theme that the author discusses in his or her work. Moving on towards the middle of the funnel, you're going to include some background information. When we're talking about a literary analysis, your background information is going to include the author's full name, first and last, the title of the work, and usually a summary of the work. And when I say summary, I'm talking one or two sentences to just surmise what the author is doing in the work or what kind of work it is. Finally, we'll get to the most important piece of the funnel, which is your thesis statement. And in a literary analysis essay, you're going to tell the reader not only what the author is saying or doing in his or her work of literature, but also how the author is doing it, what literary tools or devices are being used. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example together. The example on the screen in front of you uses Lucille Clifton's Lost Baby poem, which you read during the first week of the course. And just notice how the introduction follows the funnel method, beginning with a broad universal statement, then moving into some background information, and finally a thesis statement. So the introduction reads, "Moral questions are rarely black and white. Often the options available to a person are limited by his or her life circumstances." Written in 1987, the Lost Baby poem by Lucille Clifton details the speaker's difficult choice to abort her unborn child. Using direct address, sound repetition, and water imagery, Clifton explores the ways race and class intermingle to complicate the speaker's moral dilemma. So again, notice that the first two sentences are a broad thematic statement that do not mention the poem. The third sentence gives us the title of the poem, the author, and gives us a short synopsis. And then finally, the last sentence lets us know not only what the poet is writing about, what the theme is, but also what are the three techniques that are going to be discussed in this particular essay: direct address, sound repetition, and water imagery. There are many ways and many formats to create a thesis. This is one of the things that student writers oftentimes get stuck on. So I am going to provide a couple of formulaic models that you may or may not find useful. Please do not feel as though you are required to use these. But one way to approach writing a thesis for a literary analysis would be here, right? The author's name. What do? They examine a theme of some sort using literary device number 1, literary device number 2, and literary device number 3. Another way you might go about organizing a thesis statement, right? Author's name uses poetic technique 1, poetic technique 2, poetic technique 3 in order to express the theme. So again, these are just some of the ways that you might organize an introduction or a thesis. Again, I want to emphasize these are not the only ways to do so.